Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry, and our guest today is here to talk to us about something, or talk with us about something that we can all look forward to, and that is growing old and the changes that come with it. It's my pleasure to have with us today via Zoom Counselor Nikolas Gutierrez of the Guam and Micronesia Geriatrics Workforce Enhancement Program. Nikolas, thank you for making time for us today, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Maybe we could start off with you sharing a little bit about the program and your involvement with it.
Sure thing. So I am a co-facilitator for online support groups for family caregivers of persons with dementia. Our program started in the fall of 2020, and it serves the community it started with the community of Guam, really, during the pandemic, as a way to give caregivers a forum to kind of meet, to talk about their struggles and their trials and tribulations, and also some of their successes and the blessings of being a family caregiver. And really, the program has kind of taken off from there to serve people in the community of Guam and also in the outer islands, people from Saipan, Yap, Palau. We serve the community, as I said, online through the Zoom platform. And we have four main components that we run. The first and foremost is our virtual family caregiver support groups. And as I said, this is a great way for family caregivers, both past, present, and even people that are looking forward to being family caregivers in the future. And it's a great way to come together to learn about the subject of caregiving, to learn to voice the concerns, the struggles that people have had with the subject of caregiving and on their caregiving journey. One of the things that we acknowledge about caregiving is it can be an extremely isolating experience. And so one of the things that our program prides itself off of is being able to kind of put together this community where family caregivers can come together, and especially it being online and family caregivers, having a really busy schedule themselves. For a lot of family caregivers, they're still working themselves as well. So with that in mind, we pride ourselves off of our online support groups to give someone, or to give our community, a lot easier access to this information, to this support. In the support groups, we also host dementia care training and consultation. So that's through the form of our CARES training and certification program that covers different topics with family caregiving. It also works with different professionals around the island who are professionals and consultants in these different topics as well. People like neurologists, speech and language pathologists. And then out of the support group, we also run a 24/7 support network hosted through WhatsApp, where family caregivers from the support group can get 24/7 access to all the other participants that are in the group, as well as Dr. Twaddle and myself. Dr. Twaddle is my co-facilitator who runs the support group with me. He's a licensed clinical psychologist. And we also have a telehealth dementia care for individuals and family counseling. So we do individual and family counseling as well through telehealth, through the Zoom app as well.
What I was hoping we could do today is maybe look at some of the more common, for example, physical and mental changes that occur as we age, to give ourselves and caregivers an opportunity to see this through your eyes of understanding. And then, of course, if they're interested, an opportunity also for you to share your contacts at the end of the show for those that might like more support or more information. I think, of course, most people, when they think about aging, they think first about the physical changes that occur in our bodies. What are some things we can be aware of, for example, if we're caring for aging parents that are often common, and something to be aware of, especially for safety purposes?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, one of the changes, and you mentioned physical changes. So with aging in general, what we see is a general kind of slowing down of a lot of the processes, the mental processes and the motor processes that we're so familiar with and we may take for granted in our youth and as we're growing older. And a lot of the time, it's very common, a lot of us say that as we're growing older, we kind of, once you get past a certain age, you kind of start having these aches and pains. Your thinking kind of starts to slow down. And so with the physical changes, one of the big changes that we see is a little bit of a slowing down of mobility. And really that has to do with several things. First and foremost, with physical mobility, with loss of muscle structure, as we age, our muscles aren't as flexible as they used to be. And so being able to do things like getting up and getting down from chairs, getting up and getting down from the couch, walking around as we normally do, as we age, we're at a lot more risk for things like falls, slips, and things of that nature. And along with that loss of muscle structure and that loss of flexibility, we also have a slowing down or a loss of balance. So that's one of the biggest things that we see with our aging population. And one of the biggest health concerns is really this kind of risk for falls. As we're in our younger years, and especially, when we look at children, they can kind of go through a really hard tumble and they can get right back up and go right back on with whatever they're doing. But that's not the case as we're aging. And the older that we get, we find that even small falls and these small kind of tumbles or these small kind of slips, because our body is not as flexible as it used to be, these kind of things that happen to us, it affects us a lot more heavily. And so we've met people talking about how just small falls, it takes them a lot longer to heal from these things. And as we're aging, not only our muscles are declining and our flexibility is declining, but also the strength of our bones as well. So what we'll see is people being bruised a lot easier, maybe even breaking or fracturing bones a lot easier, and it taking a lot longer to kind of get yourself back to that 100% or back to normal. So that's one of the biggest things that we see.
What can a person do to help maintain their physical health as they age? Can you give us some maybe top 3 recommendations?
Well, the biggest thing, and I'm going to go ahead and steal a line that we've had with one of our physical therapists that's come and talked with the group in our support groups. He had a really good phrase, and there's that common kind of phrase, you got to use it or you lose it. And so the idea that the less active that you're becoming in your lifestyle, the more muscle structure, the more flexibility, the more that you're losing from those kind of skills. And then he's also kind of flipped that around where he's told us that you have to train it to gain it, right? And so really one of the biggest things that we like to push off to people that are aging, to our elderly community, is to try to keep yourself mobile. And it really is kind of it's a catch-22, or it's a downward spiral. When we're kind of aging a little bit, our muscles are not as active, and our lifestyle too is not as active. And this kind of creates this trend where we're hurting a little bit more. It takes a little bit more effort and energy to move around and to be mobile and to exercise. And so people will have a tendency to kind of stop that or slow those processes down. And that kind of leads to this other process of it becoming even harder to be mobile and it becoming even harder to exercise. But in our support groups, we like to kind of train the opposite or teach the opposite, that we have to keep ourselves mobile. We have to keep ourselves flexible so we can kind of fend off those processes, that fend off that kind of the muscles degrading and that process in and of itself. And it really doesn't have to be anything too extreme. Really, it's, for every person is different and everyone has their own limitations, but just the act of kind of staying mobile in and of itself kind of really helps. and also really stretching too. So a lot of the time we kind of we're very quick to kind of get right into the action. But as we're aging and as our muscles are becoming less flexible and our body's becoming less flexible, really kind of doing this kind of basic stretching and consistent stretching it becomes much more important. And another thing about it is really consistency is key. And so, and it doesn't, and as I said before, it doesn't have to be anything extreme. You don't have to be going out every day and working out for an hour, 2 hours a day, but maybe 2-3 times a day, just a good 5-minute kind of session of stretching, of moving about, taking simple, like leisurely walks. Those are all things that are really helpful to kind of keep us on this momentum and to keep our muscles kind of strong and healthy and flexible. But another thing that I just wanted to point out is just the idea of pain in joints. So we're looking at so instead of workouts or exercises that are really kind of like high intensity, we're looking for things that are a little bit more gentle on our joints. So activities like swimming, water aerobics, things that take a lot of pressure off of our joints, those things are really helpful as well.
Just to kind of hit the highlight then, it's key, stay mobile and do a little bit every day and go easy on your joints. As you said, a little bit consistently over a long time can reap a lot of positive results.
Absolutely. And really kind of stay, know your limits, stay within your limits, but keep yourself active. Don't, be gentle on yourself, but don't give up.
Also related to physical changes, I believe these two items are also tied not just to the physical, but also to the cognitive process and how our brains work. And that's changes to hearing and vision. Tell us about that.
So absolutely. As we're aging, and we'll hit with hearing first and foremost, is one of the things that we've learned in our support groups is that as we're aging, as we're gaining these hearing problems, it can be really difficult to kind of go about our life and to maintain our relationships because of the fact that and it can be really disorienting to kind of go about our lives with hearing only maybe 80% of what's going on. And what we've learned from our audiologists here on Guam is that it actually takes a toll on the brain. And so that's one of the first things that we want to push out to people is if you're having hearing problems, definitely speak to a physician. If you're able to afford it, if you're able to get those kinds of things like hearing aids, they really go a long way in not only helping you to kind of hear more easily and to be more involved in as you're socializing with people and to maintain relationships. But what we've learned is that people that are going without these hearing aids or without kind of any kind of aids with their hearing, the brain actually struggles a lot more to kind of compensate for one's loss of hearing. And so what we've seen in past studies is people kind of people that are going through the process of hearing loss, if they're not doing anything about it, the extra toll and the extra struggle on the brain, it actually leads to a quicker kind of a quicker lifespan of the hearing loss itself. So people losing their hearing a lot quicker. And then also in the case of Alzheimer's and dementia, as I said, this extra kind of strain on the brain, it kind of leads to this quicker kind of degradation of the brain cells when it's trying to compensate for this loss of hearing. So that's one big thing. And then same thing with vision. Really, as we're losing our vision, sometimes people will call it tunnel vision, where we're only able to see kind of the center view or the central view of our vision, and then everything around us getting blurry. And really, that's another thing. As I said before, you really don't want to go with it being untreated because the strain of kind of trying to say that I'm just going to buck up and go through it and, and muscle it out, right? As some people say, that creates this extra strain on your eyes and this extra strain on your brain to kind of work harder just to see as you once normally did. So absolutely, that's one of the things that we're going to have that we wanted to push. And then going back to kind of this risk of falling. So problems with hearing and problems with vision, all of these tie in to this lack of balance, to this, to a person's balance and coordination kind of going down in this downward slope is because the fact that you're not able to see as well, you're not able to hear as well. One of the things that we're taught is that our ears and hearing in and of itself has a lot to do with not just hearing things, but with our balance and coordination. And same thing with vision. So being able to move about freely, to be able to coordinate ourselves within space, it has a lot to do with our hearing and vision.
Could you speak real briefly to sometimes the resistance we feel to, for example, get a hearing aid or maybe have cataract surgery? What might be the thought process there? In
my personal experience, and I have an issue, or one of my family members has an issue with hearing, and his big thing against trying to go for hearing aids, for any kind of speech device that will help him hear a little bit more, is kind of the vanity of it. And so not wanting to feel old because that's what we think of. When we think of having to wear a hearing aid, we think of the idea of, oh, we're getting old, right? And it really is kind of this, it's kind of a vain thought to think that, I'd rather just kind of struggle with my hearing rather than go out and kind of get these surgeries or get these assistive devices to help myself. And really, the thing we'll push with that is really the ends justify the means, And then same thing with the surgery. Obviously, a big thing with a lot of people. And, something that's hard to really fight is the monetary value of it, the actual cost of getting the surgery, or maybe a fear of going to the doctor, a fear of having the surgery in and of itself. But as I said before, the ends really kind of justify the means. You really can't put a price on being able to hear clearly, on being able to see clearly, and all the benefits that it does for you in the long run, especially as you're aging.
And also, I understand that as we age, for example, we may have a change in appetite.
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things that we'll see as we're aging is a change. One of the things that has to do with our change in our appetite is kind of the loss of taste. And so a lot of people will have this kind of their taste isn't as strong. Yeah, and so one of the common things that we'll see in our society is like elderly people will kind of gain a sweet tooth if they haven't had a sweet tooth before. And then, and another thing is with spicy foods. So a lot of elderly people, they enjoy like really spicy foods. And one of the ways that we make sense of that is the idea that it's harder to, as we're getting older, as our brains are getting a little bit older and more aged, and we're losing a lot of these kind of nerves that we once had as we're younger, the tastes that kind of stay with us, it's harder to taste a lot of things in between, but these kind of strong tastes, sweet, sour, spicy, these are things that kind of stay with us as we're aging. And so it makes sense that, as you're getting older, an elderly person would want to kind of go with these things, because that's where you kind of get a lot of your fulfillment out of eating, right, is from your taste. And then another thing that it comes down to, especially in the case of people with Alzheimer's and people with dementia, is a thing that we call dysphagia. And so the act of swallowing for you and I is pretty automatic, right? We don't really have to think about when we're chewing food and we're trying to swallow it. It's a pretty automatic kind of system that goes into place of taking the food from the back of the mouth and going down the throat and into the stomach. But what we'll see with people that are aging, and especially with people that have dementia and Alzheimer's, is the loss of these neuron connections, or loss of these connections in the brain. It actually makes this process a lot harder. And so what we'll see is people having to be a lot more conscious about the types of food they're eating. So like the consistency of the food, the amount of chewing that they have to do. And so people kind of staying away from certain foods as it becomes harder and harder to swallow. And it can really be a stressful process when we think about the fear of aspirating, or the fear of kind of choking on your own food or drowning on liquids and things like that. It can kind of dissuade you from wanting to eat. And so that's where we'll see kind of people having a lower appetite as well.
We're talking today about aging and some of the changes that we can expect as we all age. And we'll be back with more after this break.
I Northern Marianas Humanities Council bula guinahanya puri historian Marianas dan kultura. Sinyon soda esisihanan formasyon gi zon mami website nmhcouncil.org. Pat bisita gi YouTube pat Facebook. Guajaloque diferentes clases lebluna sinya unfan. In Northern Marianas Humanities Council has uzura todo I experiencia tautau.
Welcome back to your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking today about the changes that come with aging. And our guest today is Nikolas Gutierrez. He's a counselor and co-facilitator of the Guam Marianas Geriatrics Workforce Enhancement Program, long title for a very important work that you're doing among the elderly and caregivers. Nikolas, I wanted to start off this half by saying that there are some positives. Actually, there are a number of positives. One is I recently learned that a lot of times, even as we age, if we're a creative type of person, that kind of sticks with us. And we still have the ability to learn things in most cases, although it may be slower. I think that's something to look forward to. More time to be creative and learn stuff.
Absolutely. And especially as we're aging, we're kind of getting into our retirement and things like that. It's a great time to kind of pick up skills, to learn activities, to kind of keep us busy in our day-to-day lives and really keep our brains stimulated as well.
Related to cognition and how the brain works, what do we see as far as cognition and, for example, short and long-term memory changes as we age in a lot of cases?
Well, cognition is a really interesting topic. And so I'll break the answer up into kind of two steps. So the first changes that we see with cognition, and we'll call it regular aging or normal aging. And this is kind of aging without dementia, without Alzheimer's, which is a totally separate thing. But so for normal aging, what we'll see is a general kind of slowing down of the brain. So a little bit, people call it kind of cobwebs in the brain, right? And so a little bit of a harder time memorizing things and recalling things. And so things like waking up in the morning and kind of not being sure what day of the week it is, right? And then later on kind of as we have our coffee, as we have our food, as we wake up a little bit more, we kind of get our gears back together. We kind of get the motor running a little bit more and we're able to place ourselves. And same thing with kind of going around. If we're going around, we're trying to navigate through roads or we're trying to navigate through a store or something like that. We have a little bit of a harder time, or we'll have moments where we call them senior moments, right? Where we kind of forget where we are or forget what we were doing. We walk into a room, we forget what we were supposed to be doing. And eventually that kind of kicks in and we remember, oh, okay, I was going to meet a friend or I was going to get something. Remember. Yeah, absolutely. And then same thing with kind of learning new skills is it just takes a little bit more time to kind of learn and to retain new information as it compared to before when we were a little bit younger, when our minds and our brains were a little bit flexible, right? And then going into that flexibility is, there's this kind of, as we're aging, we can become a little bit more used to kind of this the being able to do the same routine, right? Our minds aren't as flexible. We want to kind of know what to expect, know what we're doing with our day, have this kind of set plan and rolling with that set plan because our minds aren't as flexible to all the changes and all the kind of hectic lifestyle that we used to be able to be used to, that we had a lot of energy for. And so that's what we'll see with normal aging. And then as we go into dementia and Alzheimer's, what we see with dementia and Alzheimer's is a physical changing of the brain. So as we're aging, we have these kind of expected things, these expected kind of slowing down, but still being able for the most part to have our devices with us or being able to get through a lot of things. But what we see with dementia and Alzheimer's is a physical changing of the brain. If you look at pictures of a person's brain from normal aging to a person with dementia and Alzheimer's, you actually see the brain is smaller and it's shrinking as the dementia progresses, as Alzheimer's progresses. So in this, we'll see a lot more drastic changes. These changes and this ability to hold on to short-term memory is a lot less. Is a lot less. And what we'll see is people holding on to a lot more of their long-term memory. So being able to remember things from farther on in the past, but having a really hard time trying to recall what we did yesterday or the day before. And then same thing as we were talking about with changes changes with the brain being less flexible, what we see with persons with dementia and Alzheimer's is almost a night and day, like a changing in personality, where a person is really not able to kind of take in new information, to kind of balance different ideas and different thoughts and put things together. And so there's a lot of things that are affected with changes in the brain when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's, things like reasoning, things like judgment, perception, as we talked about earlier, our motor skills, memory, as we said, and even abstract thoughts. So abstract things like telling time, looking at numbers, knowing what numbers signify when we're paying bills, trying to balance our checkbook, do banking and things like that. These concepts become a lot harder for the brain to manage in the case of dementia and Alzheimer's.
Well, Nicholas, I was really hoping that we would have sufficient time today to really help our listeners gain some insight into this part of our lives. But honestly, I feel like the best thing we can do is, for those that are interested, is really share where they can learn more from you and the other professionals on your team, and where they can get support, as you mentioned at the top of the show, from others who may be also caregivers. First off, please share with us, if people are interested in learning more and doing that, where they can find you and your team.
Well, first and foremost, if there's any questions that you might have specifically and you wanted to kind of reach out to our team personally, we have our email address. So you can email us at any time. We'll get back to you. We do have we have a very small team working with us, so we do apologize if it takes a little bit time to get back. But you can always email us at GWEP. It's GWEP.TGSS. And that's gwep.tgss at triton.uog.edu. Triton, TRITON.uog.edu. So that one is our email address. And then, as I said before, we run a support group for family caregivers. And so by emailing that email address, you guys might have seen it. You might have seen our flyers or our announcements in your newspapers before. But anyone that really has, if you email us, you can get a hold of that Zoom link. We have 2 Zoom links, one for Wednesday evenings and one for Saturday mornings. So every week we hold 2 support groups on Wednesday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. and Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. And this is an excellent opportunity, as I said, to come in, to ask all the questions that you have about what it is to be a family caregiver, to talk about your experience as a family caregiver, and to give and receive support on the journey of what it's like to be a family caregiver. And the support groups are really open to anyone with ties to the Marianas, interested community members, family caregivers themselves, past or present or future family caregivers, as well as healthcare professionals and anything in between. So it's really open to anybody. There's no password. There's no registration. You get a hold of the Zoom link if you can find it through our website or through any of your news announcements, or email us directly and we'll send it right to you. And it gives anybody an opportunity to come in and to learn more about dementia.
Thank you for the work that you do. And again, if people are interested, I think another easy way for them to find you is go to the University of Guam website and look for this service and this program there. Any final thoughts before we go?
Well, first and foremost, just thank you so much for the platform about being able to talk about this really important topic and being able to kind of share the services that we provide. And just kind of rounding it out with what we started is absolutely, I think, one of the best ways of kind of treating the case of aging, right, is staying proactive with it, trying to keep yourself, your mind busy, trying to keep your body busy, and to hold on to a lot of these skills, a lot of these strengths that we're kind of losing as we see naturally with aging.
Our guest today has been Nikolas Gutierrez. He's a counselor and co-facilitator of the Guam, Micronesia Geriatrics Workforce Enhancement Program. Contact them via the University of Guam website if you would like to participate in any of their online services. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Terry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.